Hello and welcome once again to Rip Off Britain, where today we have a real mix of stories that all have one thing in common. And it's something I think really that most of us can identify with. You paid over your money, but what you've got in return is entirely different from what you expected when you handed over your cash.
I'll say, because whilst most of the people who've told us they haven't got what they paid for were left counting the cost to their wallets, among them are those who've had far more devastating consequences.
So, as we try to get to the bottom of what's caused such dreadful problems and discover why everyone we're going to be meeting now regrets the decisions they made, we'll have plenty of advice so that if you find yourself in a similar situation, you'll have a much better idea of how to get out of it. And why a procedure you can even get on the high street has left some patients with side effects that haven't gone away.
It was quite possible that the symptoms that I was suffering, they may never go away. I was pretty destroyed, to be honest with you.
If you're fed up with fumbling for your specs and sick of struggling to see, you might be tempted to do away with your glasses or contact lenses altogether and opt for laser eye surgery to correct your vision for good. It's now so common you can actually get it on your high street. But some critics are warning that an industry that's already poorly regulated is becoming fixated on making new sales.
Suction on, please.
Procedures like this would have been unimaginable just 30 years ago.
So now we're going to lift your flap and then treat, okay?
An eye surgeon has made an incision in the patient's cornea.
Okay, here we go.
Which will now be reshaped to drastically improve the patient's vision.
Good. Well done. So that's the shape change done.
Behind me, Emma's eyesight is being changed forever thanks to a procedure which is so common now you can get it on your local high street. I'm talking about laser eye surgery. The whole thing lasts about 10 minutes from start to finish, and at the end, Emma ought to be able to say goodbye to the spectacles that she's worn for the last 20 years. Every year, around 100,000 people have laser, or as it's officially called, refractive eye surgery in the UK. And the market leader by a long stretch is Optical Express.
At Optical Express, our patients tell us that our laser eye surgery has changed their lives for the better. They tell us how simple, easy and affordable our procedure is, but mostly they tell us that they wish they'd done it sooner.
But I'm afraid a number of people have told us they wish they hadn't had it done at all. Among them, Tony Wilkinson. Today, he's having his eyes checked by an independent optician, hoping to find a solution to the problems he says he's had since having laser eye surgery at an Optical Express clinic in Sheffield in 2016.
Suggest you try reading that line.
YHRPD.
Well done, Matt. Thank you very much indeed.
He'd hoped to be able to ditch the spectacles that he'd worn all his life, but instead he's ended up swapping them for dark glasses because ever since, he says his eyes have been extremely sensitive to light and so dry that he needs a constant supply of drops.
I need to wear sunglasses in all daylight hours or in strong light conditions. The dry eye symptoms I tried to combat using gels and eye drops every 20-30 minutes of the day. I need to apply nighttime gels and ointments to my eyes to stop them drying out, so I do have to get up 2 or 3 times each evening.
Tony says all these symptoms started immediately after his laser eye surgery. They're common side effects of the procedure, and in most instances they'll usually dissipate within a few weeks. But Tony says in his case, that's not happened.
I think 6 months on from the operation, I began to be very concerned. I was still suffering with photosensitivity, and I was suffering quite severe dry eye symptoms.
Optical Express offers checkups for a year after each procedure. But after he'd had all these, and with no significant sign of his dry eye symptoms clearing up, Tony was given some devastating news.
It was quite possible that the symptoms that I was suffering were going to be long-term, In fact, they may never go away. I was pretty destroyed, to be honest with you.
And Tony says the response he had to this from Optical Express rather took him by surprise.
Optical Express replied saying that they was prescribed as normal symptoms that people would suffer, and that was fully discussed in the consent procedure.
What's more, even though his troubles were ongoing, he was told that if he wanted to continue his aftercare once the year of free sessions was up, he'd have to cover the cost himself.
They confirmed to me that they no longer wish to provide aftercare unless I was willing to pay consultation fees of up to £150 per visit.
Now, Tony appreciated his procedure came with a risk, and he'd signed all the paperwork acknowledging that. But he wasn't happy at the prospect of having to shoulder the cost of further appointments, and he hasn't been back to Optical Express since. But while he was looking online for anything that might be able to help, he discovered by chance that in 2014, the same surgeon who treated him had been at the centre of a court case brought by a woman who'd been left with similar symptoms to his. Optical Express had been ordered to pay £500,000 in damages after the judge found that the short consultation the patient had had couldn't have adequately spelt out the procedure's possible risks or complications. And while that ruling has nothing to do with Tony's own beef with Optical Express, the surgeon's history is certainly something he thinks should have been brought to his attention.
I was quite shocked to find out the case was prior to me having the surgery, and I wasn't made aware of that.
Optical Express says complications from laser eye surgery affect less than 1% of patients, but that's a risk that a number of patients we've spoken to now wish they'd never taken. Carole Wilson had the procedure in 2016, hoping it would mean an end to wearing glasses for anything other than reading. Instead, she says she's now constantly swapping between pairs.
During the day, I have to change my glasses thousands of times. If I want to do a simple job, I have to wear 2 pairs of glasses and maybe take my glasses off. It makes me really frustrated.
Wayne Latham says he has suffered from dry eye symptoms since having the surgery in October 2016.
They keep saying it's going to get better. It didn't get better. And I'm still taking these drops every morning because my eyes are so sore when I wake up.
Of course, complications and side effects from laser eye surgery can affect any patient, not just those treated by Optical Express. And while that company says its patients are given time to thoroughly consider the procedure before they're treated, right across the industry, there are no independent figures about success rates or complications. That's why the professional body in charge of ophthalmologists is calling for standardized training for anyone carrying out this procedure. They also want patients to be able to check their surgeon's track record so they can be sure they've made the right choice. Mr. Sheraz Daya is a consultant from the Royal College of Ophthalmologists. He fears that laser eye surgery's place on the high street can often mean patients don't take it as seriously as they should, focusing on the cost and convenience and expecting instant miracle results. I suppose one of the problems is that it's become so commonplace that it's available on the high street that there might be a slight mentality that it's almost like getting a pair of shoes.
You're absolutely right. That's unfortunately is what has happened. And that's a commoditization of a surgical procedure. If you were to embark on this, what would be your first concern? Whether you'd go blind or not, right? Mm. But when you start getting distracted by, oh, you can get it for $3.95 an eye, the emphasis changes. Then you go into the mode where, oh, if it's that easily available and it's that inexpensive, I'm going to find myself a deal. And you completely forget the important side of it all, which is how do you find the surgeon, how do you find the centre, how do you check their track records and most of it.
Mr. Daya believes that choice would be made easier if all laser eye practitioners had to meet a set of minimum standards. Currently they don't, but for the past decade the Royal College has been pushing for its own standards to be taken on across the industry.
If every organisation, every surgeon follows those standards, then all laser eye surgery everywhere will improve.
But 18 months on, Tony says his symptoms show no significant signs of easing. So now he's hoping that independent optometrist Vivian Bush can tell him if that's ever likely to change.
FNH, I'm guessing.
Tony has worn glasses with a particularly strong prescription all his life. So he says he was first drawn to Optical Express when he saw its eye-design LASIK eye surgery promised 20/20 vision or your money back. But it seems 20/20 vision isn't the crystal clear, perfect sight that you might assume.
20/20 means normal vision. Now, you looked at my test chart and you were able to get down to about this line on the chart, which is the 20/20 line.
Though that's good news, Tony says his biggest problem is the dryness and extreme sensitivity of his eyes, which began immediately after he had surgery.
Well, sensitivity to light, or what we call photophobia, is pretty common. We know that amongst people who've had laser surgery, it happens more frequently.
Do you feel like these symptoms have been a direct result of the laser eye surgery that I had?
It's impossible to say yes or no. We know that people who've had laser eye surgery do have definite dry eye type symptoms and need lubricant drops. But I can't ascribe your condition to your laser surgery. Talking to me.
And Vivian says that with the right level of protection and treatment, Tony may not have to endure these problems for good.
It'd be interesting to see if you give that eye maximum protection, give it maximum lubrication as well, we would expect to see a significant element of resolution. What I can't say is what things will be like 6 months, a year or more down the line.
So for now, Tony is left with the uncertainty of not knowing if his symptoms will ever improve.
I hope that one day these symptoms will become less invasive into my life and my quality of life, but I don't know when that'll happen or if that will ever happen. It's quite upsetting and distressing to have to cope with this without knowing that there's an end in sight, so the discomfort that I have.
When we spoke to Optical Express, it stressed that the experiences of Tony and the other people we've heard from are not representative of the vast majority of its patients, 99% of whom say they would recommend the company again. It says laser eye surgery is considered one of the safest forms of surgery, but as with all procedures, there is an element of risk, which is discussed in detail with every patient before they undergo the procedure. It stressed that every one of the cases we spoke to signed and initialed each of the 39 sections of the informed consent document, had the risks and possible side effects explained, and were given time to reflect on their decision to proceed. The company points out that that means Carole Wilson acknowledged she might still need to wear glasses for some tasks in the future. As for Tony, Optical Express says that while prior to the procedure he was extremely short-sighted, he's since then been legal to drive without the need for spectacles or contact lenses, and that at his last consultation he achieved 20/20 vision with both eyes, with no suggestion that his sight was other than satisfactory. It went on to say that Tony has never complained of light sensitivity, and the company believes he does not need sunglasses or tinted visual aids in daylight. Optical Express also says that whilst the vast majority of patients have no significant post-surgery complications, its expert clinicians work closely with the small minority that do. But it says Wayne Latham did not return for eye health consultations between October 2016 and June 2017, despite numerous attempts to contact him. Nevertheless, it's offering a full clinical evaluation to all the people we've featured in order to help treat their symptoms. And it made clear that it prides itself on exceptionally high standards of clinical care, subscribing to robust industry standards that it considers better suited to a multidisciplinary clinical environment than the proposals of the Royal College of Optometrists. But back at the college, consultant Sheraz Daya has very clear advice so that if you're one of the tens of thousands of people planning on having laser eye surgery anywhere with any provider, you fully understand what you're getting into and all of its risks.
Find out about the operations that are involved. Do your research. The Royal College of Ophthalmologists has a resource for this sort of information. Check out all the different centres and then go away for a week, think about it, be sure that's what you want to have done, and then go ahead and have surgery.